Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my subject tonight, the one that I have chosen to initiate this course of occult studies, is the effect of color, sound, and magnetism on man and his aura. The subject is profoundly important to all of us because we live in an aura which is effervescent, constantly changing, and it is only some of us who are aware of how important it is to have the environment of such a nature that it helps us to live in the world rather than opposes us. Tonight I'm going to give you many interesting, scientific, occult facts about color and sound and magnetism, which you will not find in books. There are many good books on the subject, but they have been written many years ago. Roland Hunt's work on radiant symphony and so on are well known to you. My substance tonight is new, and I have deliberately chosen this particular approach because it is time in this new age to sound a new note. And what an age this is, and what an explosion of color meets the gaze of man everywhere. This color explosion, which has been seen particularly in the last 30 years, is so obvious to older people who grew up in an era virtually drought-stricken of color. Everywhere we're confronted by color today, not just colored television and colored magazines, but in almost every aspect of human interest. We have pink vinyl shoes and dresses in fluorescent colors. We sit on fuchsia sofas. We have canary yellow refrigerators and telephones, Chartreuse dinner dishes to eat out of, silver lame overcoats, green and orange party-colored suits, crimson automobiles, flaming orange cooking pots, magenta shirts for men, green neckties with huge crayon yellow dots, neon-colored rain slickers and purple umbrellas for dull weather, waste paper baskets and psychedelic tints, bank checks in every hue and color, scarlet nylon yacht ropes and yellow tarpaulins, construction workers in orange rain suits, surgeons in Kelly green operating room gowns, and even the Queen of England going to Ascot races dressed in shocking pink. What an age we live in, and how it has changed. And with this color explosion, there has exploded with it man's consciousness. I always liken the growth of man's consciousness in this age to the explosion, the rushing blast of an exploding atomic bomb as it surges outwards. And man's exploding consciousness is just like this, not only engulfing every one of the elements of the earth, but rushing out into outer space. And with it there has been, or almost heralding it, there has been this explosion in his awareness of color. Now, some say that this explosion in man's awareness can be credited to about 200 people. It is said that about 200 men and women, rare individuals, by virtue of their sacrifices, have changed their fellow men, have made mankind think differently, scientifically, culturally, politically, artistically. About 200 people have been responsible for it. Surely amongst these 200 we must count those initiates of ancient wisdom, who were the great impressionist painters. In occult parlance we term them fourth-ray souls, souls on the ray of art and harmony through conflict. These fourth-ray souls, who always work within the ashrams of masters, had put together, pooled their resources to produce this revolution in color by their initial efforts in the field of impressionism. Now, they were different. They were different to ordinary artists, and they had been created, they had been put into this work specifically to change the pattern of color in our new age. How were they different? Instead of imitating on their canvases, putting onto their canvases something of life about them, painting cows and scenery and bowls of fruit and saints and sinners and cabbages and kings, they were different. They dared to express on their canvases inner experiences, not outer experiences, inner experiences. And that's what made the Impressionists so much. They were portraying on their canvases the landscape of inner space, not outer space, inner space. They were having inner experiences who were like the modern poets, like Gerard Manley Hopkins in their own field. They, like the modern poets, were trying to portray what they called the instress of inscape. So strong was this experience inwardly that they were forced to express it outwardly. And this made them different from ordinary artists. We could also compare their work and the modern poets with Virginia Woolf, who in the field of novels was again expressing her innermost thoughts and feelings in her novels. And so we see that the impact of the Impressionists was an unusual one. They worked from within outward, whereas other painters had worked from the environment and from canvases. They had ignored, as it were, the instress of inscape. Now, this explosion of color in man's consciousness began with these French Impressionists. It was these Impressionists, with their bold, experimental, uninhibited use of color, that led up to the contemporary art of today. Our grandfathers, of course, grew up in the Victorian and Edwardian ages in drawing rooms that were virtually monochromatic in their drabness. There was hardly any color in those drawing rooms. In those days, kitchens and bathrooms were always in white. On Sunday, people on Sunday always wore black, and people in mourning did the same. Men never wore anything else but white shirts. Today, things have changed, haven't they? If somebody says that the lady wore red in the Victorian days, it meant a dirty thing. A lady wearing red meant that she was a harlot, that she had gone out into the town and painted the town red and had worn red herself. There was, as it were, profound criticism for anybody who dared to display color. There were set codes and creeds as to how color should be worn and used. We even have to this day certain sayings out of the Victorian age which demonstrate this. We say green and blue will not do. We say red and purple don't mix, and so on. Well, that's all gone. It's all gone, and the Impressionists were the ones who changed it. Today, everything goes, and never has the human eye been subjected to such intense color stimulation. And I, as an occultist, can only point to the teachings of C.W. Leadbeater, who said that under the impact of color in the world, in our own age, man's eye would begin to change, that the inpouring of color onto the retina of man's eye would produce certain changes which would make man able to see the aura, enable him to become, in fact, clairvoyant. And so this is part and parcel of a new process which heralds and brings in a new age. Now, how did the Impressionists obtain such extraordinary revolutions in the field of color? Of course, they were aided by the onset of the industrial age, by the development of color in dyes and in plastics, certainly. But it was something else that made them successful. They had been able to reach, by means of their vivid colors, something that was already there in man. Man possessed something in his makeup that responded to color. Something in him responded to color. It was not just the eye that was seeing the color. but somehow or the other his feelings were changed by the impact of these colors. And what was it in man that was receptive to color, that changed his feelings, so that some people love certain colors and their contrasts, and other people are repulsed by it, loathing it? Today we have scientific evidence for what this was. And of course it was in fact the force fields of man which we call the human aura. Man is something more than just an eye set in a physical body. Man possesses, as it were, other vehicles of consciousness than merely the one that carries his brain. What was happening was this, that the impact of color was stimulating what the yogis describe as, in fact, the etheric body of man, a subtle vehicle of consciousness. We do not, as it were, feel with the physical body. Interpenetrating the physical body, there is an ether body, a body of very subtle substance. It is so intangible that we cannot even measure it with scientific instruments, but it is there. And today we are photographing it by means of certain processes that I'm going to describe a little later. Similarly, man's physical and etheric bodies, which the yogis describe, is also interpenetrated by an astral body. Man possesses a body of feeling. We do not feel in the physical body. We feel in a feeling body or astral body. It is tangible, it is something. And on Sunday night I'm going to give a lecture on the techniques of controlling this astral body, this body of feeling, and how of teaching how it can also be projected under this control. Now it is this sort of vehicle that is impacted by color. Man's astral and etheric body. The astral body, you well know, is a body that may leave the physical body behind at night in sleep and roam through the ethers, go to all parts of the world and travel in very subtle planes of which its material is made. Many of us have memories of moving around in an out-of-body experience. We talk about dream states and astral projection, and many of us have had these experiences. Similarly, man possesses, as it were, in coordination with these, a mental body. And in this mental body, man is able to think. I don't know whether you can see the blackboard. It's a pity the spotlights are just not hitting it at the right angle. Nevertheless, we think in a mental body. And this mental body is, again, a tangible organism. Thoughts are things. Science accepts this today. Thoughts are things. We have a vast amount of research information proving just this. We have the work of Jules Eisenbud, Dr. Eisenbud of Denver, and his work on Ted Serios, a man who could put, as you well know, a camera to his brow and think very, very deeply, strongly, and even though the lens of the camera had been removed, he could project a thought form onto a sensitive photographic plate. Thoughts are things. Now, this material of man's inner bodies, the body in which he thinks, the mental body, the astral body, and the etheric body, was impacted by color. The impressionists were reaching this. And my talk tonight concerns this force field of man, which we call the human aura. And it is this human aura which has been, as it were, a receptacle for all sorts of impacts from our environment. Music affects us profoundly. Color affects us. The magnetic fields of the earth. The ionized atmosphere before a thunderstorm. 1,001 different things affect man. And it is important for some of us who are sensitive, who must live in this world, must indeed be creative in this world, to know something of the forces that do impact man and his aura. this aura that was so clearly described by the Red Indians, portrayed by the Red Indians in their headdress of feathers. The Red Indian chiefs, of course, being initiates into ancient wisdom. The Red Indian tribes being, as it were, the most psychic of all races the world has ever known. And they portrayed in their headdress, their feathered headdress, the outlines of this etheric, astral, and mental aura, and knew about it well. Today, we have photographs to show the existence of it. And so, we're learning to understand that color and its various combinations impact subtle vehicles of man's consciousness. As Matisse, the great artist, said of the Impressionists, the paintings of the Impressionists, constructed with pure colors, proved to the nation that these colors, whilst they might still be used to describe objects or phenomena of nature, these colors contain within them, quite independently of the objects they express, the power to affect the feelings of those who look at them. And the Impressionists not only discovered this, but they brought this to a very, very high perfection in their art. Color can affect us powerfully. No one doubts it today. Every advertiser, every person that uses any sort of medium to reach the public is aware of what color can do. I had the opportunity of working with the Delaware laboratories in England. And there, my great friend and co-worker, George Delaware, had developed a strange instrument called a reflexograph. We were able to see physically how color and sound and magnetism affected man through this strange instrument. What he did was to pass sound waves through the wrist of an individual. A subject, a volunteer subject, would sit there with his wrist, allowing sound waves to be passed through the wrist. As the sound waves passed through the wrist, they, as it were, lost energy, and the waves were altered in their pattern, as I have illustrated it here. When this pattern had been clearly established by frequent testing, we then introduced a change into the environment of the man sitting there. We suddenly flashed colors in front of him, various colors, and he reacted tremendously. This input of sound was altered, or rather this output of sound was altered violently in the presence of colors. He changed, as it were. Some colors made him react more violently than others. And we did this not only with paintings, but we did it with sound and music as well. Again, there were changes and reactions to his hearing jazz or hearing classical music. Later, we began to use magnets in the experiment, and we found that even though the person did not know that a magnet was near him, the moment you brought a magnet near his back, behind him, again, this reflexograph reacted very violently. Sometimes we would use a magnet that was electrical, an electromagnet, and we would switch it on from the next door room. The moment that that magnetic field was in operation, this person's reflexes changed tremendously. And it was arising out of that work in the Delaware laboratories that I went to my research work into magnetism, because, according to the masters, the adepts who have taught me, the aura of man, that aura that I described a little earlier, is magnetic. Of all the forces, of all the energies that pertain to man, the energy of magnetism is most related to man's aura. And you know and I know that it is concerned with the aura that we have such powers latent in man as telepathy, as mesmerism or hypnotism, if you wish, and all the other paraphernalia of the occult sciences. It was important to me to try and demonstrate to the world that magnets do affect man, and they do, and we have shown this quite clearly. Now, the moment that we know that the aura is magnetic and is susceptible to magnetism, and I'm going to show you what later scientific research shows in this direction, the moment that this is proved, then we have a rational basis for astrology, for telepathy, for Kirlian photography, for clairvoyance, clairaudience. All these capacities of man have a scientific basis, a rationale incorporated into to the energy of magnetism. So today we live at a time when we understand that color is affecting us profoundly through our auras. There's something very important to stress here before we go on. And it is this. The effect of the Impressionists was different from other artists. They changed life about them. All other artists had been different. All other artists had been changed by their environment. If there have been certain historical scenes in the life of the artist, he put them on his painting. He reacted to the politics of the country, the fashions of the day. But the Impressionists were different. They changed the world, and they were different from other artists. How was it that they were so successful? How did they produce this change? The answer is that they worked with natural law. They worked with natural law. And natural law, or occult, or hidden, or esoteric law, says this. If you want to change a thing so that it will endure and persist in its changed form, you change the nucleus of the thing, the nucleus of the individual. You work on man's inner bodies, especially the spiritual or soul nature of man. And if changes are procured there, then these changes will work outwards, and he will be changed for all time. And this is true not only of man, but of animal, plant, and the very atom itself. And this is why the Impressionists were so successful. They worked on the nucleus of man. Man's inner nature was being changed by their pictures. Today we have examples of how change does not endure. And probably the best example of all is in the field of modern medicine. Here we have modern medicine again and again, year after year, practicing a wrong procedure, trying to treat the physical manifestations of a disease that starts inwardly, trying to correct the headaches, trying to correct the pains, the outer manifestations of a dis-ease that lies within. Let us examine this, how true it is. 20 years ago, we had very wonderful and costly drugs. Today, of that huge list of drugs that were so important and that were prescribed to you and me in good faith, of that huge list of drugs, only 2 remain. One's an antibiotic, penicillin, and the other is aspirin. And all the others have been taken away. We are told they're poison, they're toxic, not to touch them. But we were using them 20 years ago. And they were used to change man's outer manifestation when he was ill, his symptoms, his signs and symptoms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know as well as I do that the lovely list of drugs that we have today, in 20 years, they will be changed. They will all be declared poisons and toxins. And still only aspirin and penicillin will survive. Simply because the medical world works outwardly, inwardly, the wrong way. The way to change a person's disease pattern is to reach him inwardly. No doctor today will deny that at least 60% of all diseases are of psychosomatic origin, even though perhaps 50 or 60 years ago this was regarded as patent heresy in medicine. Today most doctors will accept that most diseases are caused inwardly by mental stress, by emotional stress working itself outwards. The Tibetan master, he who taught me, the Tibetan master puts this percentage as high as 90, that 90% of all man's disease stems from within him, and only a small fragment of it has, as it were, a physical or outer origin. Now, you will begin to ask, is it possible then that colors in our environment, that music and magnetism, in fact our total environment, can change the nucleus of man? We all know that it can change man's attitudes. We see this going on in the world all the time. If you want to bring a child out who is very introvert and shy, we dress him in red. When the child wears red, he shows off. He begins to become extrovert. We see that red has an impression on the, as it were, the nature, the personality of the child. But the question here tonight is it possible that by combinations of color, by combinations of sound, that man's real nature, his innermost feelings, and his innermost spirituality can be changed, so that, in fact, he evolves spiritually as a result of his environment, so that his powers latent can manifest through, as it were, shaping and changing his environment to suit this inner change. And that really is the subject of my talk here tonight. Now, we do know this, that the human aura is tremendously susceptible to all sorts of changes in our environment. The reflexograph of Delaware that I showed you on the board here is out of date. It was out of date even whilst we were fashioning it. Today we have Kirlian photography. Kirlian photography, practiced, used by scientists, medical men, philosophers, all over North America, Russia, England, and the West. What is Kirlian photography? Some say it is the ability of certain cameras to photograph the human aura. It is nothing of the sort. It's nothing of the sort. We must understand quite clearly what this Kirlian photography is. It is able to show, however, that how man thinks, how he reacts to his environment, does affect the aura. This is what Kirlian photography does. If we took a picture of man's finger with Kirlian photography, we would have the following effect. What happens is this. We place a huge voltage of low amperage, a high voltage current. We pass this through man's body. And the moment that the current functions, the surface of man's body begins to give off electrons, cold electron emission we call it. And this we can photograph. Now this is not the aura, it is, as it were, an aura which is exaggerated. We, all of us, in our auras do give off cold electrons, but they cannot be normally photographed. However, when we place a high voltage current through the body, the cold electron emission is accentuated, and this can be photographed. In itself, it's not important. Even as kids, we used to pass large voltages through ourselves with a Van de Graaff machine, and this can easily be photographed. Now, what Kirlian photography does do, however, is this, and it's terribly important. It shows that according to the attitude of mind of the person receiving the voltage, his auric emissions change. The quality of these fields flowing around the body change. Their quality changes and the extent of the emissions change. For example, it is found that when a person drinks a lot of alcohol or smokes, or when a person thinks violent thoughts or feels emotionally unstable, or when he practices pranayama, controlled breathing of yoga, in all these situations, the amount of flame or fire which is given off from the fingertips and from the whole body changes. The amount and the quality changes. And out of this there has arisen some extraordinary discoveries. For instance, it has been shown quite clearly that the moment that a person goes into trance, the amount of energy flow is tremendously increased, and great flames gush out from the surface of the skin, as it were. The moment that the person goes into trance. A young man in California has this ability to breathe very rapidly and deeply and go into a trance. The blood chemistry changes slightly, producing a transient loss of consciousness. The moment that he does this, the fire that pours from the fingertips is tremendous. Similarly, it has been found that with so-called healers, that similar changes occur. The moment, well, they'll photograph the healer's fingers, and there will be a normal emission of energy, but the moment the person lays his fingers, the healer lays his fingers on the patient that he is going to apply healing forces to, and as it were aligns himself, most of them say with their souls, then straight away the force fields change, and again during the healing process great gushes of flame are emitted from the fingertips. And this is what Kirlian photography is showing, that according to our emotional states, our mental states and so on, and these are affected constantly by the environment, the emission of energy from the surface of the body changes. All of us is receiving from within huge amounts of energy, and this energy is passing out from our body surfaces. And according to our attitudes of mind, according to whether we're hearing music, or whether we're seeing a beautiful picture, or a horrid slum scene, whatever it is, we are, as it were, changed in our ability to radiate energies from us. And this is the great thing. Remembering, of course, that people not only heal, but they teach. That people, in fact, influence each other merely by their presence. And so we live in an exciting age in which Kirlian photography is, as it were, bringing us into new awareness of forces at play. I am excited by it because something that I have taught for many years has been vindicated. It's been shown, for instance, that a leaf, like a human being or like an animal, also emits a force field, a sort of aura. And when you bring a bar magnet near the leaf, if you place the bar magnet there, so that the North Pole points to the leaf and the South Pole away from it, then this whole aura, or emission of electrons from the leaf, is pulled towards the magnet, And in fact, this emission may go up as far as halfway along the magnet, in fact, in the North Pole region, proving what I have tried to teach for many, many years, that man's aura, his force field, is magnetic, and that the work on magnetism that I and other, if I might say, brave people have done, and for which I was jailed in Los Angeles, this work is of importance, tremendous importance. So now, today, we live in a greater awareness that our environment affects us tremendously. A mother-in-law who is enraged is pouring out energies, and those energies can be easily absorbed by anybody who is supermagnetic in his aura. And so we have the concept of some people being most receptive to forces of the environment, and others being able to reject the forces of the environment. Man is a very, very delicate instrument, very delicate indeed. For instance, we know that man's physical body changes constantly. It is a well-known medical fact that not one single atom of my body that I possess now will be in this body in 18 months' time. Even the calcium of my bones will be completely replaced into a matrix, into something that science knows nothing about. We call it the etheric matrix. And new atoms will be built into my body. That is a medical fact. But ladies and gentlemen, what about the etheric body of man, made of such subtle substance? The teaching is that within a few hours, the matter of the etheric body can be changed. What about man's astral body, his thinking body, and so on? Do these change? They change within minutes and seconds. Now we begin to see how susceptible man is to his environment. Man, in fact, is nothing but, as I have said before, a fountain. Man is a fountain, like a fountain of water. The shape of the fountain remains, even though 2 seconds later, all the molecules of that fountain are changed. The shape of the fountain remains. Man is just like this. He is a delicate organism. even though you were to increase the temperature of this room by 50 degrees, man standing in the room would keep his temperature balanced at about 98 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. We have huge body mechanisms to maintain, as it were, our dynamic equilibrium. Now, the question arises, is it possible that some people can use the environment, can suck in and absorb energies from the environment and store them in themselves for use elsewhere? Is it possible also that some people can't help it, but they absorb energies from their environment, from people who are malicious and harmful to them, and they are prey to these energies, and that they are made ill by the presence of these forces or energies of the environment? And the answer is yes. And we who are yogis, who tread the path of unfoldment, of increasing spiritual awareness, when we learn our disciplines, we are taught to integrate these bodies, to, as it were, purify the etheric body, to have control over the astral body, out of which arises the techniques of astral projection, to have control of the mental body, to have control of the spiritual body. And indeed, this is what we do achieve. And we learn in the process that we can, by acts of thought, by changing the attitude of mind, and by pranayama, or breathing regularly or in rhythm, we can, if we want to, absorb the energies which are flowing in the environment, such as when we go out into the sunlight, especially if we have seventh ray physical bodies, we can absorb endlessly energy of the atmosphere which affects us deeply. Similarly, we learn to cut off the influences of others who try and, by means of thought and emotions, to affect us. And this is what we talk about, the growing perfection of man, spiritual development, the ability to control and integrate our various bodies to resist intrusions from the environment. So what about those who are placed in the exact opposite position, who have not got integrated astral bodies, whose mental bodies are hardly formed at all? And I'm thinking now of those who are emotionally unstable. How are they affected by the color of their environment, and by the music of their environment, and by all the other factors? And the answer is that they are profoundly affected by these intrusions. In fact, this is the basis of much dis-ease, is the inability of these people with their very, very unstable, subtle bodies to adapt themselves to their environment. We have in England at this very moment great interest in the pregnancy of women. And pregnancy, a pregnant woman is a person who is under threat from the environment. A woman who is pregnant has an aura that is being changed from within. A new life, a new aura is being created. And in this unstable condition, women who are pregnant are very, very susceptible to harmful and equally so to joyous or harmonious influences of their environment. In ancient days in Rome and Greece, the pregnant woman was surrounded with harmonious conditions. Music of a special type was played to her. She was related various stories and poetry, as it were, to refine the aura, and especially to reach the aura of the child that was developing within her. Today in England, we find intense interest in the subject of women who smoke during pregnancy. It has been found again and again that the child of pregnant women, the children of pregnant women, are affected profoundly. Frequently they are underweight babies. Quite often they lack response to nourishment that other babies of mothers who have not smoked have got. These children of mothers who've been affected in pregnancy, have very frequently a lower mental development than other children. The period of pregnancy is one in which the aura is very, very receptive to outside influence. We can also apply this to children. especially adolescence. The period of adolescence is one of incredible change in the auric bodies, making them most susceptible to the environment, most susceptible to the parent's influence, to an environment of security, as we well know from our own sociological studies. I have seen and have dealt with boys in the East End of London who are by reputation known to be tough, probably the toughest boys in the world. They come from a stock that resisted the Blitz, the German Blitz on London, and resisted it in a magnificent way. But I have seen young men from the East End of London who live in terror of the dark. I have seen such men also in a moment of anger and passion lie on the floor and kick and scream because they have unstable astral bodies. And it is these people who are very susceptible to some aspect of sound and color, especially music. And the music, which we now term as pop and rock and elements of jazz and so on, this music can profoundly affect the human aura. Some people would say not adversely. I would deny that. I know for a fact from observation and from experience again and again, and I've had this confirmed by others who have taught such children, that when a child becomes increasingly interested in the jazz, blatant, blaring, sounding music of pop and so on, these children tend to lose the capacity to reason, especially in the field of mathematics or math. They cannot cope so easily as they used to with mathematical problems, and quite frequently they have to give up a course of study in math because of the dependency that they have on this sort of music. The music must do something to the mental and emotional aura so that they cannot, as it were, lay down methodical pathways in their reasoning and deduction. Now the question arises again. Is it possible that color can reach to the depths of man, can reach his soul, can produce spiritual growth, can release powers latent within him, can make him clairvoyant, can make him clairaudient, can, as it were, give him continuity of consciousness, the ability to be conscious 24 hours a day at all levels, not just in the physical body? The answer, of course, is that it is possible for the environment to do this, but not just through straight color, not just through sound. No amount of just making a sound is going to change the spiritual content of man. What is it through sound that can change him? We know, of course, from many teachings of the philosophers that the eyes are said to be the windows of the soul. The eyes are the windows of the soul. Surely then light and color can affect man's soul. Certainly light and color affect green plants. They affect animals and send animals, as it were, in the lack of light into hibernation, and in the presence of light bring them into sexual growth at the time of spring for the mating season and so on. Light and darkness do set body clocks. This we know. Man is affected. He has a circadian rhythm in his body which is dependent on night and day. So this we do know. But how can man be reached to such a depth as to stimulate his soul? We do know that if you impact a man with light in the springtime of the year, he does react. The light comes into his eyes, and from the eyes there is an effect on the ajna center, the chakram described by the yogis lying in the brow, and thence into the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland secretes hormones that cause growth of man's sex organs or activity of the sex organs, and man is changed. The question arises now, is it possible for some of the light impulses in color combinations and sound combinations to go deeper into man, to reach man's astral body, his spiritual bodies, which lie, as it were, in the nucleus of man? The answer is yes, but how and what is it that the soul reacts to? Let me stress it now, the answer to this. Man's soul does not react to color per se, to sound per se. What man's soul does react to is to the quality behind the color. Not to the color itself, not to the sound itself, but to the quality behind it. Color is the physical effect of inequalities of some object. Color is the physical outer effect, manifestation of the inner nature of an object. And that is what you must understand if you would use your environmental forces to, as it were, open to stimulate the growth of your own soul. Cézanne knew this. He once was known to remark, light does not exist for the painter. Light does not exist for the painter. Color does not exist, for that's what he meant by light, or colors. What he meant was that it is the quality of the object that he paints that reaches the painter of great sensitivity. The color may be similar when he puts it down in pigment. The color may be similar, but what he's trying to put into pigment is the quality of the object. That is the important thing about color and the great artists. In meditation, we do exactly the same thing. And a person who meditates is no different from a person who is a profound artist. For both are trying to contact quality behind something they meditate on. If you're meditating on a rose or a concept or whatever it is, a person, you're trying to reach the quality. And if you wanted to know why, the answer is that the nature of man's soul is quality. The soul of man has been described in various ways. It has been described as a triangle of energy because it is formless, but it has three main qualities about it: Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. Divine persistent will, the quality of love wisdom, and the capacity for abstract thought. All these are in man's nucleus, which is portrayed as an upright triangle. And it is therefore said that man's soul is formless and its nature is quality. Quality. And we hide all this with our aura and our various bodies. We hide the soul of man. And when we meditate, we try and, at a soul level, reach an understanding of what we're meditating on, if it is a rose. And it is the ability to reach from soul depths a rapport with the soul of a rose, or the soul of somebody else that we are meditating on, whom we're trying to as it were, reach. Matisse knew this, the great artist. He observed, my choice of colors does not rest on any scientific theory. It is based on observation, on feeling, and on the very nature and quality of the experience. He says it isn't, I don't paint my pictures by any standard, by any accepted form or scientific theory. What I try and do is to paint according to the quality of the thing I'm painting, to try and portray its quality. Renoir was a great believer in this. He said, I want a red to be sonorous, to sound like a bell. If it doesn't turn out that way, I add more reds and other colors until I get it sonorous, sounding like a bell. What colors he adds doesn't matter, so long as he gets the quality of sounding like a bell. And that is what we have to understand about the nature of man and his environment. It is the quality of the environment that affects the quality of man's soul. Not just the color, not just the sound or the music, but the qualities and the combinations of qualities. And that is the real crux of this whole question of what the environment does to us. We should not think that it is just blue, but the quality underlying the blue. May I read a very short poem that describes this exactly? Here is a man who's going to describe drought in South Africa. A sun-baked felt. I'm going to need some more water, please. A sun-baked felt that has not had rain for 2, maybe 3 years. Thank you. The cattle are lying about, dying or dead. The earth is baked hard. There's nothing but dust and everything. How is he going to, as an artist, portray this in words? Listen how he does it. To obtain the quality of that drought. Day on day of crashing sunlight, when the hammer blows of heat, the intolerable dazzle, blaze, and blare of the sun are like the stubborn brain, the arrogant brain, the soul-destructive brain of instruments of brass. Forgotten, long forgotten are the shining melodies, the violin melodies of lightly falling rain. Forgotten, long forgotten are the silver ecstasies of softly flowing springs, of dream-entangled streams. He has used words in any method possible to convey the quality of that drought, how it was destroying and affecting his innermost nature. And that is what we have to remember, to try and evoke quality in everything. No wonder the Buddhists used to say that the human body, the whole body, thank you, is an eye. That the body begins by becoming open, by the aura becoming powerful, becoming integrated. The whole of man's body becomes an eye. The whole of man's body becomes an eye. And you who've trod the path, you who have gone into deep meditation, begin to understand the meaning of this. Begin to understand that we see not just with the eyes may be shut, but we see with the aura, the totality of man's inner nature. The whole aura becomes an eye. Parts of the aura may see things. Parts of the aura may smell things, not just through the nose. The whole aura becomes a sensitive vehicle. And that's what the Buddhists meant when they described the body is an eye. And we are individuals who tread the path who are able just to do this, to make the whole of man's aura, as it were, sensitive. You're going to ask me, by what means does an environment reach man's soul? And the answer is by resonance. By resonance. When we are in resonance with something, we have established a vibration along with that which we are in contact with, which will profoundly affect it, and it will profoundly affect us. I remember teaching you superconsciousness through meditation, and I remember likening the individual, the disciple, the person treading the path, to a tuning fork. The tuning fork is just like you and me. At first, when we sound it, it makes an awful note. Later, when we sound the tuning fork, after having, as it were, molded the instrument very, very carefully through many lives of endeavor, we send out a clear note, a sine wave. And this is what we try and do in meditation, send out our note. And somewhere eventually that tuning fork's note, the disciple's note, reaches a string, as it were, in an ashram or a violin of initiates, the masters. And that note of yours strikes resonance or produces resonance in one of those strings. And the string or the initiate or the master begins to vibrate to you, or he is vibrating at a certain pitch and you are, and a resonance is established. And the moment that happens, there is transmission between you and the ashram. There is an interplay. You're sending, as it were, influences into the ashram, into your very soul, and out comes resonance, through resonance and energy, back to you. And this is what we mean when we talk about resonance in meditation. And it is through this method that we transfer energies of the environment to the human soul. We ourselves as personalities have to raise our vibrations, just like the striking of a tuning fork. The moment that tuning fork is struck, or the moment that we, as it were, raise our vibrations, then things begin to happen. Here I am, as it were, as a personality. Here is my soul, or the soul of another individual, or of a rose or something, which has its vibrations. When I try and contact that, when I try and become in resonance with it, I raise my vibrations. I send out part of myself and try and establish contact with it. First of all, I say, I am. I sound my own note. Then I'm going to try and reach the note of the soul of another individual, or my own soul. And I have to raise my vibrations. And I have virtually to say to myself, I am that. I am that. I'm trying to say, I am that. I'm trying to raise my vibrations to that. And then when success in meditation becomes possible, then we have the following situation, that this one's vibrations is the same as this. And then we, as a personality, say, I am that I am. And then we have established this resonance. And immediately there is a flooding, there is a flowing between the two. And we call this yoga. We, as it were, become one with the quality, the soul, behind that thing, and in fact all things. And this is known as yoga. In esoteric parlance, of course, we talk about the personality of man being a triad, and the soul of man being an upper triad, and the building of an antakarana in yoga, the building of a rainbow bridgehead. Something must be built between the two. And when there is resonance between the two, when the personality is raised in vibration to a tremendous height, and music can assist us, and sound can assist it, then there is resonance between the two. There is interplay between the two. And man becomes flooded with the energies of his soul. Now, we're going to have a break for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and I'm going to continue with the talk to describe the nature of man's soul as it is seen by the masters, what it is that we're trying to reach with color and sound and magnetism and other effects in our environment. And then we're going to see how this mechanism is obtained. Thank you. Please have a break. Sound, and we're beginning to understand what it is that these forces must reach, and that is what we call the Egoic Lotus, the nucleus of man. And is it possible by means of arranging our environment, the color and sound of our environment, to stimulate the nucleus of man, to produce spiritual unfoldment and the growth and release of latent powers? When the masters are asked to describe the nature of the human soul, and it is a very difficult thing to describe because it is formless, they say it may be likened unto a lotus. The human soul may be likened unto a lotus which is opening. A lotus which in a lowly developed person has not begun to open at all, but through many lives on earth, the bud begins to blow, the tiers of petals begin to unfold, and finally, when the whole lotus is in bloom, man becomes a perfected master. There are 3 tiers of petals on the lotus which hide what is known as the jewel in the lotus. The jewel in the lotus, which lies, as it were, at its very most center. The Buddhists describe this as Omani Padme Om, Omani Padme Om, the jewel in the lotus. And this lotus has 3 qualities of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas that I described a little earlier. Through many lives on earth, these 3 tiers of petals open. Certain experiences on earth tend to open the petals. The petals don't open only in tiers, they all open contemporaneously, but certain qualities affect certain petals. Amongst these, of course, color and sound and magnetism. And the three tiers of petals may be described as follows. There is an outermost tier of petals, which are called the knowledge petals. The knowledge petals. These knowledge petals form an outermost tier of three, and they are concerned with the quality of learning. The man, first of all, as a savage, must come onto earth, and he must, through many lives, learn. He must learn by trial and error at first. And by trial and error, he learns that fire can hurt him, can burn him. He learns the value of warmth, on the other hand, as opposed to freezing conditions, and that his body cannot stand freezing conditions, and so on. The knowledge petals begin to stir. Then, as the man reincarnates and becomes more highly developed, as the petals open further, he now is not concerned with such crude knowledge. He is more concerned with discriminating between right from wrong, that which is evolutionary and working with the forces of nature, and that which is involutionary and working against nature. Man learns right from wrong. And then as he becomes highly evolved spiritually, he learns to discriminate the real from the unreal, that which is the enduring part of him, and this is the enduring part, which is not lost at death, learns to recognize the enduring nature and qualities of himself from those which are non-enduring, are unreal. There is a great theosophical mantra which connects these three together, which goes something like this: from darkness lead me to light, from the unreal lead me to the real, and from death lead me to immortality. And this sums up the qualities of these knowledge petals. I have colored them in orange because we're going to work out a chart. Unlike any other teachings on color and sound, I am going to produce a method for you to appraise yourselves of, which works from the nucleus of man outwards, because that is true natural law. We're going to consider the qualities of man's nucleus and work outwards until the environment is reached. And that is the correct way to do it, and this has never been done in the West before. So we possess knowledge petals. When we incarnate in certain signs of the zodiac, like the fixed signs, and the knowledge petals are related to the fixed signs of the zodiac. By that we mean the fixed cross. The fixed cross. And we have Taurus and Leo and Scorpio providing opportunities for this opening of knowledge petals. The color there being orange in particular. We will think about other colors later. Notice that right in the center, in the jewel in the lotus, is Aquarius, the other aspect of the fixed cross. And Aquarius, with Pisces and Capricorn, represents a particular finale in the opening of the lotus. A finale, a final few lives which emphasize these three signs of the zodiac. Then we come to the second tier of petals, remembering that all these will be sensitive to color and sound, but not directly, but to the qualities of color and sound. And so we come to consider the second tier, which is known as the love petals. The love petals. And the love petals are just that. The love petals are related to the color indigo, which is the color of our solar system. And the quality of our solar logos is love wisdom. The quality of our solar logos is love wisdom. He is a chakram, a heart chakram, portraying love wisdom in the body of an enormous being, of a great being. And these love petals open under the influence of conditions in our environment which are related by color or by sound or by love aspects to them. Thus, if we practice heart chakram qualities in our incarnation, the love petals tend to open. These people who have these opportunities to open love petals will be people of an introvert nature. They like to live in withdrawal from the world. They very frequently pupate, turn inwards. They can meditate easily, whereas the others tend, as it were, to learn, to obtain facts, and so on. These love petals are responsive to heart qualities, to the qualities of harmlessness. People who can practice harmlessness to all things at a mental, emotional, and physical level, these people open the love petals. Another quality is discrimination. Another quality is intuition. And the signs of the zodiac which provide opportunities, especially when the sign is rising in the horoscope, are Gemini, Sagittarius, and Virgo and Pisces. And this is in fact, the mutable cross. The mutable, if you have a preponderance of planets in these signs of the zodiac, then your soul's purpose in that life is connected with the opening of the love petals. And the colors indigo and blue and pink are very much concerned, and yellow, concerned with the love petals. Then we have the sacrifice petals, which we can put in green for the sake of a correlation. And the sacrifice petals are petals which are related to qualities of self-sacrifice. The person who gives his life for some enterprise for humanity, who pours his life essence out for humanity in some way. You must always remember that when you work and breathe for another or others, you are part of them. You are part of those that you work for, you serve. You are part of a living organism. And that greater living organism, which may be your own country, has tremendous powers, energies, and consciousness. And when we do this, when we serve others, and we breathe for them, then we open up the sacrifice petals. We could relate these three tiers of petals, if any of you are yogis, we could relate these three tiers of petals to three great chakrams or force centers in the head. The outermost tier is related to Ajna, the brow chakram, and tends to open the brow chakram. The love petals are related to the head center or Sahasrara, and the sacrifice petals are related to the alta major center, a chakram in the throat. And these three chakrams, as you probably remember from my previous talks, when they are integrated, tend to open the third eye. The third eye being the overlapping of three great head centers that I have described. So we begin to see that color and sound, the signs of the zodiac, the planetary rulers of the zodiac, are related to the nucleus of man and provide us with qualities and opportunities which relate to the nucleus of man. We begin to get the feel, in fact, of a great correlation which relates life, in fact, to the process of opening man's spiritual eye, his inner awareness, his soul. And so we can attempt a correlation now. We can go to this chart and we can say that the love petals of man, the love petals are related to certain colors that I have already expressed. We'll put them down on the blackboard so that we can have a complete synthesis which will assist us a little later. The color indigo, very strongly related to the love petals, to the signs of the zodiac that I suggested there, especially Gemini. Gemini is very strongly love wisdom, and the color indigo. Also the color blue, rather an emotional love, an attaching love. This is the solar plexus center rather than the heart center. And the color pink is always synonymous in occultism for blue. Pink and blue, pink not being a color of the spectrum. And then less so, very much less so, we begin to get a transition of love petals through the color yellow into the petals of knowledge, the petals of knowledge. Now we can go to sounds, and of course thereby into music, and we can talk about the sound of do, re, mi, fa, so for the color indigo, and I'm talking about that octave which begins with middle C, do, 256 cycles. And the re, of course, is love wisdom, and so we have teaching and healing. Teaching and healing related to the color indigo, to the note so, to the second ray of love wisdom. We begin to see the synthesis emerging from the whole pattern of the talk. Now we're dealing here with the sixth ray of devotion and idealism. This is the ray of the rosy cross, of those who were devoted to Christian mysticism. It's the ray of the Christian church, of the Master Jesus. And we have the note here of, this is, if I remember rightly, T. Right, remember that, yes, it is T. So we get a correlation here. Now, none of this is hearsay. None of this is made up. This is torn out of teachings of ancient wisdom. And you can be absolutely sure that the secret doctrine, the writings of the Tibetan, of Gurdjieff, and many others are related to this set of correspondences. We come to the color yellow, which marks a transition now between love and knowledge, and the note of yellow is the color mi, do, re, mi, and it is art and harmony through conflict. Art and harmony through conflict. The fourth ray, the ray of the artist, is also the ray of Buddhism, enlightenment of Buddhism, the religion of Buddhism. Now we come into the field of the knowledge petals, and we get a transition of yellow into orange, and here we have the fifth ray of the scientist, concrete knowledge and analytical science. The ray of the research worker, the scientist, the ultra-pragmatist, the materialist, concrete knowledge and science. And the note is re, do, re, mi, fa, and so on. Then we again get a transition into the first ray of will and power with the color red, scarlet, and the note is do, middle C, and the quality is will and power, and it is the first ray of will and power. The administrator, the ruler, the Conservative Party, the Republican Party, if you wish, and many, many other correlations that we'll consider in a moment. Will and power. Now we begin to move, and the first ray takes us that way into the realm of sacrifice, the sacrifice petals. And the sacrifice petals are linked to the color green, predominantly green, which is the note of nature, and the note is fa, do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do, and the quality is active intelligence, and the third ray, the ray of the philosophers, the counselors. It's the ray of money, economics, business, and so on. And then we come to the final color, which is the color of violet. The color of violet, I don't know if I can make a violet here, I'll try. And the color violet is the seventh ray. And the seventh ray's note is La. And the seventh ray is ceremonial, order, ritual, and magic. Ceremonial, order, ritual, and magic. And so we have a correlation of color and sound related to the nucleus of man. And combinations of these colors and these sounds to produce qualities of a certain ray will affect a certain tier of petals. This is what I'm hoping that you're beginning to understand. Now we can see that we have an entree, as it were, into a host of other factors. We may now go project this further. Did anybody find that chart on the rays? I had one here which somebody was nursing for me, and it just disappeared. Pardon? You saw one on the stage. All right, maybe we'll get it down in a moment. All right. Now see where we can go. We can take the petal of sacrifice, green, far. We can go into the ray of active intelligence. We can immediately go into the chakram of the throat. We can go into the thyroid gland, which overlies the throat chakram. We can go further, and is the planet Saturn, and so on, all the way along. We can find the races and nations of the world which are responsive to this, and the root races, the rounds and chains, on and on and on. I'm still waiting for the chart. Similarly, we can take the first ray of will and power and project it further. We can talk about, we can take the first ray of will and power. You can take a chart of correlations, ray correlations like that, and just lay it on there. And straight away you can look up all these various qualities. Take the ray of will and power, the color scarlet as it were. The note is middle C, will and power, Capricorn, Leo, and Aries, the signs of the zodiac. The planets concerned with the first ray and with that color and with that sound. The sun, Uranus. The food correlated with it is protein, fascism, the gas, nitrogen, sense of sight, the plane of Adi. Nervous equipment is the cerebrum, the great forebrain of man. The gland is the pineal gland. Nations of the world that are related to the first ray of will and power, to that color and so on, India and China. The personality of certain nations, Great Britain and Germany, and so on. Now we begin to see how we have, as it were, tapped and reached a very, very magnificent correlation which virtually describes all the influencing factors of any man's environment. They're all there, and this is a key to them. A man who is on the first ray of will and power will tend to thrive in an autocratic sort of government, will tend to favor conservatism, fascism, strong central government. Do you understand now how there is this beautiful relationship emerging from this understanding of the environment and man's soul? Now we come to yet one more factor which is of tremendous importance, and that is shape. Shape. Can we relate shape to color, to sound, to the qualities of man's soul? And the answer is yes. We can relate shape. And I'm going to choose the three major rays and relate shapes to them. And therefore, by the correlations that I have given, certain shapes, the temples of the future, the temple of will and power will be related and constructed out of certain shapes. and the certain colors which are related to the first ray will be used in that temple, and the note of middle C will be struck again and again in that temple, which will be all related. This is how the religion of the future is going to work. And so we're going to consider three basic patterns. There is the pattern of the square, and the square projected to its other dimensions, which is a cube, a typical current shape in our lives, in our environment. Then we could take the triangle, and we could project the triangle into other dimensions, and we have the pyramid. So we're talking about triangles, pyramids, and prisms. Similarly, we could take the circle and take it into other dimensions where we have the ball or the sphere. Now, how can we relate these three shapes, out of which are built many, many other shapes? How can we relate them to the petals of the soul, and to the colors, and to the sound and magnetic fields and so on? Now, I can just reel them off, but I'll give you something of a rationale for it. Many artists have tried to do this in the past, trying to work it out from observed facts. I am going to soul levels and to ancient wisdom. It is said by the Tibetan master that the etheric body of the last solar system was constructed out of squares and cubes. And the quality of the last solar system was the quality of active intelligence. So we can relate a basic pattern, a basic style, to active intelligence, the third ray of active intelligence. And here we have then a correlation of green, of the note fa, of the ray of active intelligence, to squares and cubes. And all the other factors related to the third ray, which you can find in the teachings of the Tibetans. Active intelligence, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer. The planets Earth and Saturn. The food is carbohydrate, the note is fa. Socialism, the gas is hydrogen, the sensory equipment is hearing, the part of the brain is the medulla, the thyroid gland is the endocrine, the nations are China and France, the shapes are the square and the cube, and so on. We see there is an underlying plan and synthesis. Similarly, we can now go to something of even greater interest to us, and that is the shape of the triangle and the pyramid. We're interested because this is the basic pattern shape of the United States of America. It is also the basic shape and pattern of Great Britain, whose interest in Egypt is well known. And I suppose in London you can see better Egyptology than you can see in Egypt itself. How is the United States and Great Britain related to the pyramid? What is the quality of the pyramidal shape and the triangle? And the answer is that the structure of this solar system is based upon an etheric matrix constructed out of triangles and prisms and pyramids. And the quality of this solar system, as I have already told you, is love wisdom. And so we can relate this shape to the second ray of love wisdom, to the color indigo, to the note so, the shape of the pyramid. Of course, the pyramid has qualities. We now know that all shapes, all regular shapes are accumulators. All regular shapes are accumulators. They're like an automobile battery. They store energy. The moment that you have a regular shape, it stores energy. You know only too well that the pyramid has now been related. One of the secrets of the pyramid is that the pyramid will preserve the body of a mammal placed at 1/3 from its base. Put the body of a pharaoh into a pyramid and it will be preserved. Assisted by mummification, it will be preserved. And so, one of the qualities of the pyramid is to preserve. It has magnetic qualities. If you lie a blade in a pyramid And the pyramid and the blade's sharpness is dependent, of course, on the hardened material on the edges of the blade. If the blade is laid in the pyramid after being used in a certain position, it will remain sharp. It will sharpen itself. It will sharpen itself in the pyramid. So there are certain qualities related to the pyramid. I say they are love wisdom through the deductive method that I gave you. Now, I also pointed out that the pyramid is the insignia of the United States of America. But by the same authority, we are told that the ray of the soul of the United States of America is love wisdom, as is that of Great Britain. Now we begin to understand that the sort of teaching that I'm giving you here tonight may seem very strange for Honolulu, but it is not so strange in terms of hidden wisdom of Rosicrucianism. For it was the Rosicrucians that helped to fashion the insignia of the United States of America. They knew of the qualities of the soul of the United States of America. They were trying to tell you and posterity that there is something of peculiar quality in the pyramid which represents love wisdom, the soul of the United States of America. And so we have related here tonight shape to color to sound. And if you wanted to write a symphony which would mirror exactly the soul nature of the United States of America, the theme of the symphony should be based upon the note so. Do you call that G? Is it G? I don't know. Does anybody know? Then we have the last of the three major shapes, and that is the circle and the sphere, and in fact the lens. Any lens is based on this. You know the properties of a lens. A lens will focus and concentrate things. You can take a lens and take the light of the sun and focus it through the lens so that it will burn your hand through its focusing capacity. It is said that the solar system to come, the one which will be reassembled after our own one, a chakram has blazed into a supernova and then died down. The next solar system will be the solar system of will and power. And so the sphere is related to will and power. The color red, the ray, one, the note, middle C. And this is the great symbol of focus, the lens of will and power. Man, in fact, builds into his aura a lens in front of his brow, which is part of the mechanism of the third eye, the opening of the third eye. And so we see that shapes can be related to color and sound and magnetism, and to many other qualities of the environment. Now we begin to understand how temples of old and temples of the future will use and have used arrangements of color and sound and magnetism to produce certain qualities, certain resonance with the souls of those in the temple, to, as it were, cause by the placing of the incense, the smell and the fragrance in the temple, by the placing of the colors in the temple, by the placing of the shapes of the temple. The dome of the temple is a place where the sound which is seen by the devas is focused, and certain qualities are added to it. The squareness of the temple relates to active intelligence, and that would be where the congregation would sit, and so on. The temples contain, as it were, the mixing capacity to produce qualities that will reach the quality of man's own soul. And in C.W. Leadbeater's very magnificent book, Man, Whence, How, and Whither, you can read about the color temples and the music temples of the future and see if they do not use just the principles that I have described here to you tonight. And so may I say in closing, and we'll have a period of questions, we can see quite clearly that man, especially man on the path, is highly receptive to his environment. Once you begin to understand and know the qualities of your own rays, then you can link them with your environment. May I go through my own rays just to illustrate the point? I have a physical body which is large and powerful, but not particularly sensitive. It's a willing donkey. It carries me around so long as I feed it and bed it and keep it reasonably warm and comfortable. It serves me endlessly. I have therefore a third-ray physical body. It is on the ray of green and thrives in the presence of green. It is very, very responsive to nature, loves nature, has green fingers. It is related to the third ray of active intelligence. It is a body that must have iodine, and a body whose throat chakram is a source of constant stimulation and concern. The thyroid gland is very frequently affected. In women, the counterpart of this would be a tendency towards the necessity for hysterectomy. There are many, many qualities about third-ray physical bodies that we know. If you asked me to, if you paid me $5,000, I'd write you a 50-page essay on the nature of the third-ray physical body, because there is sufficient information on it to produce a 50-page essay. Every one of you has a physical body responding to a particular ray. More than half of the audience has third-ray physical bodies. Almost half of them have seventh-ray physical bodies, which have different qualities. Not only the color violet, they respond well to the color violet, but they respond to order. They love sunlight. They are extremely receptive to sunlight energies and to magnetism and so on. So we have a ray that rules the physical body, the physico-etheric body. People often pester me by telling me what color aura they see around me, and generally speaking it is green, and the green aura means that they have the ability to see etheric forces scintillating in my etheric body. Now, the color of my astral body was for many, many years the same color as the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, the color blue or the color pink. But by virtue of nearly 15 years of hard discipline, I have been able to convert my astral body onto the second ray of love wisdom, which gives me the capacity to control it, to be able to use it as an instrument for my soul. And so all of us possess, as it were, an astral body which has its qualities. And once you know the rays of your various bodies, then you have a key to self-unfoldment. You can go to certain basic instructions given out by the masters and find out how to unfold yourself. I have a mental body which is on the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science, and that is the color orange. And that mental body has certain capacities, qualities, and certain defects. This mind of mine tends to make my mental nature one-pointed, an interest in a philosophy based on scientific facts and so on, and also a tendency towards hardness and callousness and casualness. But it has good qualities and it has problems. And so we have a mental body with a particular quality. The combination of these three bodies produces the personality of man. And the personality of man has a ray as well. In my instance, it's the first ray of will and power. And my personality is a first-ray personality. It has certain qualities, it has certain weaknesses, and its color is scarlet or esoterically white, and therefore, if you knew anything about the ray psychology, you could describe that personality. Finally, the totality of my nature is one of love wisdom, because my spiritual body is on the second ray, my soul is on the second ray of love wisdom. So that is the complement of one Dr. D.M. Baker. But all of you have your complement. All of you have your rays, your qualities. And it is by use of such knowledge, the knowledge of your rays, that you are able to produce conditions of magic in your lives, so that your environment is one that will help you raise your vibrations, so that you become en rapport, resonant with your soul. And that is the purpose of life. That's why you're on this earth, is to raise your vibrations, to allow the soul to be in resonance with you more and more, so that you can express the soul's quality. The quality of a second-ray soul is love wisdom, and its capacities teaching and healing. I am a doctor of medicine, and I am a teacher of ancient wisdom. I am trying to express my soul's nature. And when you know the quality of your soul, and you learn to express it in life, then you have reached the ultimate. And disease is as the result of a ray of a soul or of a mental body not expressing itself in the world. And far too many of us live lives in which we are not expressing our soul qualities. And we end up stagnant. We are uncreative. We suffer depression. And depression is entirely, directly and indirectly, the result of the inability of a person to express his soul, the soul qualities. And disease and all the other conditions stem from this factor. Now, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps you would be happy to ask me questions. Apropos of that, it's not an advertisement really, if anybody wishes to consult me about the rays, their rays, and there must be half a dozen of you here who have had your rays analyzed, I would be happy to do so. But you would have to consult Rex Harper here, who has a list. Questions? Ask me some questions. Sir? Yes. I haven't done much on music. I must point out that the follow-up on this talk is mainly emphasizing music and sound. And the third one, which would be magnetism, would be done at the festival in Toronto, where I'll have all my magnetic instruments available to show the public, showing the public for the first time in history some of the capacities of magnetic fields. Now what were you going to ask me? Music. Yes. No, not this next lecture, the next of this series. This is the first that I have given on sound, color, and magnetism. There has been a bit of sound in this. But the next one of this series, not tomorrow night, but the next one of this series is mainly emphasizing music and sound. The spoken word, the mantram, and music. Three sound factors that I deal with. Questions? Yes. Yes. And you know that you've got a first-ray soul, yes. The qualities of a first-ray soul? Yes, but will you please give me a ray of what ray do you want me to deal with? A first-ray soul or a second-ray soul? A first-ray soul, all right. The qualities of a first-ray soul, by strangeness of nature, the cussedness of nature, is that all first-ray souls tend not to have the faintest idea what they have to do in life. They have a deep inner sense of not knowing. They have a vague impression of I must be about my Father's business. They have a desire to implement the plan on earth. How, they're not quite sure, but they know they must do it. They want to serve mankind, but it isn't a service where they join in with mankind and pull the yoke. They want to serve mankind by telling mankind, this is the way to do it, that's the way, in that direction. Take these steps. They direct. They have been administrators in previous lives, have been directors. They have also had lives on the moon chain. By that we mean that many millions of years ago, whilst the earth was in a cauldron, a state of cauldron, boiling hot furnace, the moon was cooled. And this has been proved by the astronauts who brought dust back to show that the moon is much, much older than the earth. And this was the teaching of Madame Blavatsky. And she said that men existed on the moon, and there were civilizations on the moon. The men there were very much subtler than we are, because the gravity of the moon was much less. They have not left fossils behind as we know them. Nevertheless, people with first-ray souls have had lives on the moon. I have not had any life on the moon. I was individualized on the earth. They, therefore, have certain qualities linked to the qualities of the civilizations on the moon. One of these qualities makes them feel a little alien on the earth. They never feel absolutely sure of themselves or one with everybody. They tend to feel a little distant and are not understood very easily. Annie Besant was a very good example of this, and so was H.P. Blavatsky, whereas Alice Bailey is a fine example of a second-ray soul. You can detect this in their writings. Other qualities of a first-ray soul. They have a natural love of the early history of races. You're already fascinated with the early history of your race, of the moon races, aren't you? And that is a quality of the first-ray soul. They tend to love archaeology. They tend to love digs. They like to, they're interested in ancient civilizations. They tend to love, if they like poetry at all, they love epics. They tend to scorn fiction. They like to read poetry, but they like also to read biographies, especially of great people. As children, they tend to have a love of cosmic questions. They're always pestering their parents about questions of life and death and where do we come from, not just in the sense of came out of the cabbage patch, but where did mankind come from, that sort of thing. Very characteristic of first-ray soul. Is that what you wanted? A rereading of your reading? Well, yes, all right. Now I understand you. What rays are lie happily in the lower vehicles for a first-ray soul? A first-ray soul loves to express itself through a second-ray personality. A second-ray personality, which is a personality on the ray of love wisdom, is a personality that never pushes itself forward. It is not exactly introvert. These people are very magnetic. People come and confide in them. They tend to have a group about them. Second-ray personalities are often self-deprecating. Who am I to do this? And yet they will push themselves forward and take a position of responsibility when somebody must do it. And they love books. They are scholarly. They tend to be unable to say no when they go into a bookshop. There are hosts and hosts of qualities of a second-ray personality, and a first-ray soul loves to express itself through a second-ray personality. Physical bodies, the first-ray physical body. Yes, the first-ray soul would like to have a first-ray physical body if it wants a good medium. If you have a first-ray physical body and a first-ray physical soul, then you could be a medium, and a conscious medium. And you can feel vibrations from your soul. They come right down into the physical body. But the first-ray physical body is not a strong one. A far stronger body, which the first-ray soul would tend to prefer, would be, in fact, a third-ray physical body. And even a seventh ray, which is more resilient, is very strong, resilient. And yet seventh-ray physical bodies, they pick up all the childhood diseases. They tend to, if there are any childhood diseases going, the seventh ray will pick them up, especially the infections. And yet they love violet, and they have lovely resilient bodies that respond to the atmosphere, sunlight, vitality globules. They are very good at breathing. Breathing does them the world of good. Well, we're going on and on and on. Questions? Something else? No, but you could tell me. 256 cycles. I used to know them, you know, but you can get them in any physics book. I think in America you use 253 cycles just to be different. But we have 256 cycles in England, and they go progressively up to about 600 cycles. But you can get that from any physics book. Question? Sir? Jazz's seventh ray, that should tell you immediately, if you looked at the chart or looked at the board, that there are certain qualities about jazz that we could immediately assign to it. Also, Wagner is very, very first ray and seventh ray. He has not only this tremendous power and will and forceful nature in his music, but he has seventh ray capacities, which gives him the ability to work with magic, with the Deva forces. He incorporates several tunes at once especially into the Rheingold and the Ride of the Valkyrie, where you get this tremendous power and yet at the same time flurries of other not spiritual forces but evolutions of life all incorporated into it. And striking one certain note, persisting with it, which is very first ray. That sort of thing, you mean. I'm not going to give the thing on music tonight, I'm sorry. But you do see the basis on which it is established. You're beginning to see it, yes. Well, you can fit the composers. Perhaps you can spend some years doing that yourself, analyzing the rays of the various composers' works. Handel is pure sixth ray of devotion and idealism. Bach and with his chorals is more fourth ray and sixth ray combined. Beethoven is very fourth ray, very human, and he bridges the gap, it is said, between the solar plexus chakra and the heart, taking devotional and emotional energies and transmuting them into the energies of the heart, which are selfless love rather than selfish love. Tchaikovsky is very strongly second ray of love wisdom and the ability to incorporate all qualities of music into one concert and concerto and mirror the totality, which is very, very second ray. The Mater Familias, taking all sounds and bringing them into a very human piece of work. But I'm not a musician, of course, as you are. You would appreciate it more, sure. My sounds are really poetry. For me, poetry has been my expression, and I go very carefully into the rays of the poets, and will do so at Toronto. Maybe we will have time over this weekend to do that bit of a seminar somewhere. Well, for my part, I was given my rays by Robert Browning 20 years ago. And I took my complement of rays, which are the ones I've given you, second ray soul, first ray personality, fifth ray mind, second ray astral body, and third ray physical. Those are Dr. Baker's rays. And I then went to Discipleship in the New Age, which is a manual of instructions to disciples, and I found the disciple with rays very similar to mine, and I took those instructions onto my own shoulders. And I worked patiently at them for 10 years and found they unfolded me very rapidly. And that's the key. That's what I give in my readings. I go through a system of very, very close analysis. I need 35 minutes in which I question and cross-question you and dig out of you all the information going right back into your childhood, which would tell me the qualities of your various bodies in terms of rays. Then when you know that, you can go to the handbook of discipleship, and you can find the disciple with rays like yours, and you can take the instructions given to that disciple, which come from a master, not me, but from a master, and apply them to yourself. And questions? Ma'am. This lady here, please. Well, as children, we very frequently, as we grow up, we change our rays. We tend to be an agglomeration of rays, very devotional rays as children. We are attached to things and to parents and so on. Then as we go through adolescence, that's why I never try and assess the rays of a child too early. As we go through adolescence, the rays tend to crystallize, to concretize, and then they're easier to assess. But sometimes rays are a long time changing. I was crazy about green in my 20s. I'm not crazy about green anymore. I don't dislike it. It makes me feel nice when when I can lie on the green grass and be in the coolness under the green trees, because that's my physical body. I feel happy in it. But I'm not as crazy. But then I was a very earthly person around about 22. And very physically engendered, as it were. So you would understand how rays change. When I had to do medicine, to study medicine, I was already 34, and I had a fourth ray mind on the ray of art and harmony, and I used to love music, and I used to love poetry and theater and opera. But when I had to study medicine, I know I wouldn't have got it. I wouldn't have succeeded if Browning had not assisted me and changed my mental ray to the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. And that got me through medicine, but I wish I could have my damn fourth ray mind back again, because I'm a little bit tired of science. And I think it's going back again. Yes, go on down. Then I'm going to talk to this lady. Yes. Impelling them to love. Well, the younger they are, by that I mean soul-wise, the younger the soul, they tend to be influenced by considerations of childhood. If a nursery has been in blue, and it was a happy nursery and a happy childhood, they'll tend to have a feeling of security for blue. You know what I mean. And it is only when you tread the path and you learn to discriminate the real from the real and say, yes, I love blue only because a nanny used to wear blue overalls. You use nannies in this country? Do you know what a nanny is? Yes, well, nanny used to wear blue overalls, and therefore she was a comfort to me. You can discriminate the real from the unreal. And when you begin to meditate, then your true assessment of colors comes up. Your ability to recognize them, because you're discriminating the real from the unreal. But I hope I've emphasized tonight that it's not just sufficient to put a color in front of you to change your soul. It is through the exquisite blending of color and sound and other forces in your environment that produce growth. I mean, if you chose the right color and you chose the right music, and then you went and chose an incense, the incense, according to its ray and its quality, would alter the whole setup. Do you know what I mean? And it isn't just the color or the sound, it is the combination of these which produces the rare capacity to raise the personality's vibrations up so high that there is rapport between it and the soul. Yes, dear, you were going to ask me something. The price of what? A reading, $35. It's an hour's analysis. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm at the Pacific Beach Hotel. But you must have attended this talk. You must know about these bodies, that they exist, and you should, if possible, take the little book on the 7 rays, what I call the 7 rays without tears. And if you have had a look at the little book on the rays, or if you've attended this talk, it would be sufficient. I would give you the rays. But I need a good 50 minutes to an hour. Well, despite our very small audience tonight, I think we have enjoyed ourselves. It was not quite what you expected. And it is an entree, and believe me, a very, very sound entree to the esoteric. And even if you go away and you're out into the outer world and you study the occult, one day you will thank me for this talk yet once more. Thank you. Tomorrow night, Pyramids of the Mind. In fact, it's a very useful talk because it describes the 7 ray, the 7 ways, the 7 ray approaches to superconsciousness.